people of the internet, my name is Gabby, and today I'm going to be bringing you my February wrap-up. And of course this video was coming at the end of March, which shows you just how good I am at uploading wrap-ups. But nonetheless, I'm still really excited to be discussing all of my reads from February. I read 8 books, which is absolutely fantastic because not only am I staying on track with my reading goal, but I feel like I read a lot more widely this month than I normally do. Usually I feel confined into a box and I have to read from one type of genre or one type of author, and it was nice to just sort of break the chains a little bit and let myself read whatever it was that my heart desires and not feel confined. So a lot of these books I really loved and I'm really excited to discuss, so I'm going to dive right into my February wrap-up. So the first book that I have here is A List of Cages by Robin Rowe. This book is so wonderful and I could spend hours discussing it, but really what it all boils down to is that I feel like this book focuses on so many topics in YA that are just underrepresented, and these are things that could be easily explored in YA regardless of whether they're a dystopian or a fantasy or a contemporary. They're just things that need to be highlighted more and discussed more, not only in literature but in society, and I felt that it was really good that the author highlighted these things and represented them really well. I would be surprised if you haven't heard of this story, but if you haven't, we follow 2 main characters, Adam and Julian, and they were foster brothers at a point, and then they were split apart, and the story picks up with them a few years later in high school. Adam is a senior and Julian is a freshman, but they really couldn't be more different. Adam is more extroverted and more outgoing. Pretty much everyone that meets him loves him. He's just really liked by everyone, and because of that, he just looks for the best in everyone and everything, and is a very positive and optimistic person, and he has ADHD, and so you can see that he's a little bit fidgety, and that's also represented in his character. And then there's Julian, and Julian is pretty much the exact opposite. He's more shy and introverted and quiet and more childlike. He reads picture books, and he has dyslexia, so that's also, another reason behind that, and he gets picked on a lot because of that, and teachers just don't really want to bother with him because they're frustrated with his inability to learn and just pick up on things and have that innate nature for school, and I feel like that in itself was something that was really interesting that was brought up in the story. He doesn't necessarily have the best parental situation going on, and so Adam starts to find out about the way that Julian is being raised, some things that are going on in his home, and now Adam has to sort of figure out how does he go about dealing with this situation in order to protect Julian and not make everything worse. And so you really have this big parental focus in this story, and it was just so fantastic to read that because usually when you see parental relationships represented in YA, they're very unhealthy and very messy and very problematic, and you get to see that in this book, and that's the big highlight of it. But you also get to see a positive relationship between Adam and his mother that I thought was fantastic, and you also have more of the brotherly focus between Adam and Julian as the center of the story rather than a romance. And we also have the mental illness representation with Adam having ADHD and with Julian having dyslexia, and those are 2 mental illnesses that you just don't really see represented a lot in YA, and I thought that they were represented very positively. Of course, I can't speak for that, but I feel like based on reading it and based on hearing other things from readers and reviews, that's something that I could attest to. So overall, I really love this story. I love all the aspects that it hits on, and I would definitely recommend this to anyone looking for a positive, optimistic, diverse read that just is very refreshing and highlights a lot of things that you really don't see in YA, and this is definitely a 5 out of 5 star read for me. So the next book that I have here is 3 Dark Crowns by Kendare Blake. I talked about this book a little bit last month, so I'm going to keep it kind of short. I do have to say that I did enjoy this story. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. I think for me, some of the big issues that I had with it was a lot of first book problems with getting into the world and all the characters and the whole entire situation that was going on, and there are lots of characters in this story, so it's really hard to pinpoint who belongs where and where everything fits in. But once you start to get into that and you start to get more into the world, into the story, and start to pick up on things, it definitely increases its pace and gets very exciting and very interesting to read. One of the big things that I loved about this book was the political intrigue behind it. Although the political system set up in this book and the one that we see in the United States are very different, you start to notice that they're both based upon lies and deceit and just lots of underhandedness, and I thought that that was interesting because in this book you have 3 sisters that are fighting to the death to rule this entire area, and obviously that's nothing like what you see in the US, but there's a lot of lies and a lot of underhandedness going down, and I felt that that was really interesting to read and see how similar they both were, even though it's 2 totally different sets of government. And I also thought it was really cool to get to hear from Kendare and get to hear her speak about her world in the book and the entire process that she went in writing through this story, and also hearing her inspiration behind it. She actually had a lot of inspiration from bees and their whole colony, and that's sort of what inspired this story, which I thought was really unique. And of course not everybody gets that experience, getting to hear the author speak right after they finish the book, but I think that really enhanced the story in the world for me. And overall, I did really enjoy this book. I just had some of the normal first book problems with it, but I'm really excited to continue on with the series, see where everything goes, because I am very compelled and very interested to read more. So the next book I have here is actually one that I had to read for school, and I normally don't include school books on YouTube or in my Goodreads or reading challenge or whatever, just because I like to keep my personal reading life and my school life separate. But this is one book that I loved way too much that I couldn't not discuss it on my channel, and that is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This is by far my favorite classic of all time, and I detest classics with a burning passion. I feel like they're so hard to get into and relate to with our modern day society, and I feel like I just don't have that click moment that I have when I read other books, and this was just a breakthrough for me in the world of classic literature. I am so fascinated with the 1920s period and this era of greed and self-obsessment and just all about me and money and wealth. I just thought it was so fascinating to read about and see the way that that compels the characters in the story. And I feel like another thing is that my teacher taught the 1920s period really well. We did so much research in the time period, and then we read the book and had all these discussions on all the symbolism that is represented in the story. We wrote an essay and we did another project and then another project after that. We just did so much in this time period that it really helped me to understand everything that was going on, and I'm really glad that it was taught so well, because I think that's the biggest reason why I really enjoyed this story compared to other classics that I've read in school, because they just weren't taught well. Again, this is another story that I would be surprised if you haven't heard about. We follow Gatsby and Daisy, and they were lovers at a point, and it's 5 years later, they've been separated, and now this whole story is trying to bring them together, although pretty much every conflict and every barrier stands in their way. Daisy has a husband, Tom, who's very obnoxious and very snooty and self-obsessed. Her being married, also having a child, it's gonna be very complicated for her to suddenly just leave her husband and go and decide to be with Gatsby, even if that's what she wants. And also the distance between them. Daisy lives in East Egg, which is the old rich, the people that have inherited their money and have always had it, and the people that are more upper class and look at everyone else as short and shallow, and so they're very just over the top and very self-obsessed. And then Gatsby lives in West Egg, which is more of the newer rich, the people that have just gained their money and their wealth, and his neighbor is Nick, and Nick is the narrator of this story, and he is the one that has to bring Gatsby and Daisy together because Nick has ties to them both. Nick is Daisy's second cousin, and so he ends up sort of bringing both of them together and trying to sort of recreate the past and sort of seeing just whether that's something that could possibly happen or not, and is that something that is possible? Can you recreate the past, or will your just expectations be let down? So I feel like that may have not been the best synopsis, but those of you who've read this story just know how fantastic and wonderful it is. I loved all the symbolism and all of the just really interesting things that this book focuses on. I also really love the movie adaptation with Tobey Maguire and Leonardo DiCaprio. I feel like their acting was really good, and I loved all the creative decisions that were made in adapting the book and sort of interpreting some of those things that aren't really clearly presented to you. I thought that a lot of those creative decisions and creative changes were really smart and really interesting, and I was just hooked. I watched the movie twice and I loved it both times, and I may want to do a book and movie discussion on The Great Gatsby. If you guys would want to see that, you can give this video a thumbs up, but I feel like I'm talking about this book a lot and I have other reads that I want to get to, so I'm going to do that. But this is definitely a 5 out of 5 star read for me, and I would definitely recommend it if you're not a fan of classics, because this may change your mind and make it a little bit easier to get into that world. So the next book I have here is Carve the Mark by Veronica Roth. So this is a bit of a controversial read, and there's so many people that have had problems with it on so many different floors, and I completely and entirely get it. It's come to just so many different places left and right with people who've had issues with this book, and it's been very problematic in lots of different areas. I get that, I understand that, and I went into this story knowing that and expecting that from this book, so I feel like I was able to separate it a little bit more. But reading the story itself, I did really enjoy it. I loved the characters. I felt like I just really enjoyed reading them, and I could see an improvement in Veronica's writing from the Divergent world, where she pretty much was writing in a setting that she knew it very well and was familiar with, and so to see her then create this world completely from scratch just showed the improvements that was made in her writing. And I feel like the characters themselves, you could see an improvement in them, and I just really enjoyed this world. And of course it did have its typical first book problems getting into the world and understanding everything and making that connection to it, but as you start to get into it, it starts to get more fast-paced, you start to get more drawn in. I really enjoyed it, and I feel like that was because I was able to separate it from all of its problematic aspects, and I'm completely and entirely understanding of all of those things, which is why I rated this book 4 out of 5 stars, because I acknowledge those problematic issues. I get it. I am able to acknowledge that, but I didn't want that to take away from my reading experience, and I wanted to give myself the opportunity to read the book and make my own opinions before I just trusted everybody else, and I feel like you're allowed that. So I did enjoy this story, and I'm excited to wrap it up next year, see how Veronica concludes everything, since this is a duology. But I really love the characters in the world. I just enjoyed it, and I always have loved Veronica. She's an author that really brought me into the YA world, and if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't be standing here. And I actually got to meet her at a signing, which is why I picked this book up a month late, just because that signing was more convenient convenient for me, and I decided to wait until I met her to get the book and get it signed, and it was so wonderful to meet her because she's an author that really inspired me and is the reason why I am standing here today. So I couldn't be more thankful to her, and I'm just glad I got the opportunity to read her book. I understand that it's problematic, and I hope that Veronica is able to fix those issues in the second book, and she's addressed them and discussed them, so I feel like that's really enough. And I feel like if you have issues with this book and you don't want to read it, that's fine, you're allowed that, but I'm also allowed to enjoy it too. So I feel like I'm rambling, and I'm going to move on to my next read. So the next book we have here is We Are Still Tornadoes by Michael Kuhn and Suzanne Mullen. This was a book that I also discussed last month. My friend Emily gave it to me, and she got it from Griffin Teen, so I'm very thankful to both of them that I got the opportunity to pick this book up because I really enjoyed it. We follow two main characters, Scott and Kath, and this story takes place the summer of 1982 to 1983. It takes place over the course of a year, and both of these characters are writing letters to each other as they've been split apart. They are friends in high school. Kath goes off to college, and Scott stays home and helps his father run his store. And so this whole story is them writing letters back and forth to themselves about their experience in life and things that they're going through. And I really enjoyed reading that. I feel like you could have easily presented the problem of feeling like you're not in the moment with the character because everything that happens in the story is referred to in the past, and you never get to see the characters experience those moments. You only hear about it secondhand. And that can sometimes be an issue, I feel like, in writing, but I feel like it was handled really well, and I didn't have that issue in all of this book, which was great. My one problem with it, though, and I was debating about whether I wanted to say this or not, I feel like it was slightly predictable, and I was worried about saying that you could kind of put two and two together and figure out what happened, but I did want to explain why I marked this book down in my rating. I rated it 4.5 out of 5 stars. The predictability didn't ruin it for me. I just feel like it was kind of obvious, and as I started to get towards the end, I was like, yep, right, yeah, I expected this. But I did love the story nonetheless. I thought it was really great to get to hear from these characters. I love the idea of writing letters back and forth to your friend, and I feel like now with instant communication, it kind of ruins that, and it's not the same experience. So I loved getting to read that. I also loved all the 80s references in the story. I thought that was really fun, and I had just overall the best time reading the story, and I'm really glad I got the opportunity to pick it up and just get to immerse myself in the world of the 80s and these two characters and their journey together and just talking about themselves. So thank you so much, Emily and Griffin Teen, for giving me this opportunity because I really enjoyed this book. So the next book we have here is The Shack by W.M. Paul Young. This was recently adapted into a movie, and Octavia Spencer is in it, and so I went to go and see it with my mom. She actually read the book before I did and then handed it over to me to read. This is a faith-based book, but I want to read more of those types of books, and I feel like I want to highlight them on my channel a little bit as well because I know some of you out there may be looking for these types of reads. But we follow our main character, Mackenzie, and his daughter is abducted in the final days of summer in a family trip, and his daughter is murdered at this shack. A few months later, during the winter, he gets a letter in the mail from somebody who refers to himself as Papa and wants to meet him at the shack where his daughter was murdered. And he is really freaked out by this because the name Papa is the way that his wife refers to God, and this is something that's really intimate, something that nobody would really know about, and so he's just kind of wondering whether this is real, whether this is not. And so he goes out to the shack and he ends up meeting God, who appears to him as a black woman, Jesus is a Jewish man, and the Holy Spirit is an Asian woman, and they just help him come back to his faith, help him find himself as he's become a little bit lost after everything that's happened with his daughter, and they just help him to forgive and to just be more faithful and to find himself in God again. It was just a very wonderful and very enlightening read, and of course it was really weird and a little bit off. I mean, there were points where I was reading this and I was like, this is really weird, but the entire time I still felt very uplifted, and I felt like this was a very positive read and was something that was really enlightening. And as somebody who's gone through anxiety and depression and has felt just at times completely lost, it was nice to read this and to just feel positive and feel uplifted. And if you get that out of a novel, then I don't think that anything else matters. I did rate this book 4 out of 5 stars because, again, with the whole thing where I was just like, this is all so weird, I can't not comment on that. But I did enjoy the movie. I felt like it was very faithful to the book, and it was just like straight adapted, taking the book and putting it on the screen. And I've been very happy with a lot of book to movie adaptations that I've been seeing recently, so that's really good because it's a big shift to what I was seeing before. But I love that. I definitely recommend this book if you're looking for a faith-based book. As much as it's a little bit weird and a little bit different, I feel like it is really uplifting, and I think that's all that you can really ask for in a novel like this. So 2 more books, guys. The next one that we have here is Curveball by Stephanie Garber. This is another one that I bet a lot of you were seeing around. We follow 2 main characters, Scarlett and Tella, and they're sent a invitation to attend Curveball, which is this really fancy and exclusive circus and event that sort of only happens a few times a year. So if you get invited, it's very exclusive and is something that you're gonna want to jump on, especially because they've been wanting to attend forever. The minute that they get this invitation, they're just super stoked about it. But it's not necessarily the most convenient time for them. Scarlet is about to get married in a few weeks, and their father is really abusive, and so the last thing that he would want is for them to stow away, but they end up doing it anyway with the help of Julian, who is the sailor that just sort of comes into the picture. And so he helps them stow away. They get to Curveball, and Tella ends up getting kidnapped. So now Scarlet needs to participate in Curveball, get into all of this, find her sister, and get back in time for her wedding. Also, while not getting lost in all of the mysterious and the intrigue of this entire world and being able to separate fiction from reality. And it's just a very, very spellbinding read. And I feel like I just was so encaptured in the world and everything that was happening. And it was just so interesting and so action-packed and fast-paced. I just had the best time reading it. I do think, though, that I was a little bit let down by the ending, but it wasn't enough to ruin the book for me. I still rated this book 5 out of 5 stars. I am intrigued, though, because this is a duology, and so we're gonna have a second book that comes out next year. I'm excited to see how it wraps up because the ending is definitely very intriguing, but I feel like I still was a little bit let down. I felt that the ending, though, was kind of like predictable and just sort of fit with the story really well. I really enjoyed this book. I would 10 out of 10 recommend it if you're looking for like a fun circus read, something that's really action-packed and has a lot of fun, mysterious aspects within the story. And this was also the February book of the month for Owl Crate, so if you want to see me do that unboxing, I will leave it linked down below. I, again, had the best time reading this book, and it's been going around BookTube a little bit, so I bet you've been hearing enough positive things about it, but I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for that type of intrigue. So the final read that I have here isn't actually a book, but more of a character companion guide, and that is A History of Notable Shadowhunters in the Den Scenes of Downworld, told in the language of flowers, written by Cassandra Cartwright-Clare and illustrated by Cassandra Starkweather-Jean. This book was just fantastic to flip through. It isn't so much of a book, but like I said, is a character companion guide. We have characters from all of Cassie's previously published Shadowhunter World books so far, Mortal Instrument series, The Infernal Devices, The Dark Artifices, and the Tales of the Shadowhunter Academy. And we also have characters from The Last Hours, which is Cassie's new series that's coming out next year. So I had a really great time getting to read through all these characters, getting to catch up with old characters and read from new ones. I loved all the illustrations in this book. They were just gorgeous, and I loved getting to just read more from them. It was just a really fun flip through, and I thought it was a really great way to end my month. And again, a 5 out of 5 star read, and just the perfect addition to my Shadowhunter shelves, and I really loved it, and it satisfied my Shadowhunter heart because I'm like dying to get Lord of Shadows, so it was nice to get this and just sort of satisfy that craving that I had for the Shadow World. So that's pretty much it for my February wrap-up. I read so many amazing books. If you want to comment down below what your favorite read of February was, let me know. So I have to say my favorite read this month was probably A List of Cages. I just thought that it was so inspiring and just so uplifting, so refreshing, and I had the best time reading it. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next month with another wrap-up. Goodbye!